The office was unusually quiet. The hum of the air conditioning was the only sound that accompanied Evelyn as she worked late into the evening. A major project was nearing its final stages, and the pressure was immense. Everyone else had left hours ago, but Evelyn wasn't the type to leave things unfinished. Her desk lamp cast a warm glow, and the rhythmic tapping of her keyboard filled the stillness. Just as she saved the final file of the day, a deep voice startled her. "Evelyn." She jumped slightly and turned to see none other than Donovan, her enigmatic boss, standing in the doorway of her cubicle. He was an imposing figure, his suit tailored to perfection, his expression as stoic as ever. Most people at the office described Donovan as cold and unapproachable, the kind of CEO who intimidated everyone simply by existing. "Yes, Mr. Donovan?" she asked, quickly regaining her composure. "I need you to transfer the project data to this." He held out a sleek pen drive between his fingers. "I want a backup for tomorrow's presentation." "Of course," she replied, taking the drive. He lingered for a moment longer than usual, his piercing gaze fixed on her. It made Evelyn's heart skip a beat, though she didn't know why. Finally, he nodded and walked off toward his office. Evelyn plugged the pen drive into her computer, ready to transfer the files. But as the device loaded, her brow furrowed. There were already folders on it, folders that had nothing to do with work. Curious and slightly confused, she clicked one open. Her eyes widened in disbelief. The folders were labeled in a way she couldn't have prepared for. How to make friends, how to get a girlfriend, talking to people for beginners, best emotional love dramas of the 2020s, and the most shocking of all, hottest of redheads, AV Hub. Her cheeks turned crimson at the last title. She glanced at her reflection in the monitor, noting her own fiery red hair. Before she could process what she'd just seen, Donovan's voice roared from the doorway. "Stop." Evelyn flinched as he stormed into her cubicle, holding another identical pen drive in his hand. His usually composed face was flushed with panic. I gave you the wrong one," he stammered, his voice lower but no less frantic. He swiftly leaned over her, yanking the pen drive out of the port before she could say another word. The silence between them was deafening. Evelyn stared at him, wide-eyed, while Donovan avoided her gaze entirely, his lips pressed into a tight line. "I apologize for the mix-up," he muttered stiffly, plugging in the correct pen drive. Without another word, he turned and walked out, his ears visibly red. Evelyn sat frozen for a moment, then burst into quiet laughter. The man everyone feared, the seemingly untouchable Donovan, had just revealed an entirely unexpected and human side of himself. As Donovan retreated from her office, his usual confident stride replaced by a slightly hunched, almost defensive posture, Evelyn found herself staring at the now-closed door. The silence of the empty office seemed to echo with the absurdity of what had just transpired. Her boss, the legendary Donovan Reynolds, the man whose mere name made junior executives tremble, had folders about making friends? She couldn't help the small giggle that escaped her lips. It started low, then grew into a full-blown laugh that she desperately tried to muffle with her hand. The image of the intimidating CEO with a meticulously organized folder titled How to Make Friends was too ridiculous to contain. Over the next few days, things became awkward. Donovan went out of his way to avoid direct eye contact. When they passed in the hallway, he would suddenly become intensely interested in something on his phone. During team meetings, his gaze would sweep everywhere except where she sat. Evelyn, for her part, found it increasingly difficult to maintain a serious expression. Every time she looked at him, her mind would replay that moment, the panic in his eyes, the fumbling with the USB drive. One afternoon, while discussing a marketing strategy, she caught him mid-sentence. He was explaining a complex market penetration strategy, his voice smooth and confident, when suddenly their eyes met. For a split second, something flickered. Embarrassment, recognition, a shared secret. He stumbled over his words. And the market will... Evelyn bit her lower lip, fighting back a smile. Weeks later, the project reached its conclusion. The team buzzed with excitement, planning a celebratory dinner at a cozy local diner. As they chattered about the evening, Evelyn noticed Donovan standing by his office door, watching the group with an unreadable expression. She didn't know what compelled her, but before she could stop herself, she called out, "Mr. Donovan, why don't you join us?" The room fell silent. Every pair of eyes turned to her in disbelief. Donovan, too, looked startled, his brows furrowing as if he hadn't heard her correctly. "You want me to come?" he asked, his voice quieter than usual. "Yes," Evelyn said firmly, ignoring the stares of her colleagues. "It'd be nice to celebrate together." Donovan hesitated, his gaze flicking to the other employees, who were now whispering amongst themselves. Finally, he gave a small, almost hesitant smile. "All right." The diner was lively, filled with the clatter of dishes and bursts of laughter. Donovan sat stiffly at the end of the table, his polished demeanor starkly out of place in the cozy, informal setting. The group tried to include him in their conversations, but his curt responses and formal tone only added to the awkwardness. Evelyn, sitting across from him, decided to break the ice. She raised her glass of beer and said, "To surviving the project, and surviving late nights with Mr. Donovan." The group burst into laughter, and even Donovan's lips quirked into a faint smile. He sipped his wine, but Evelyn noticed his cheeks were already tinged red. It didn't take long for her to realize he wasn't a heavy drinker. In fact, he couldn't hold his liquor at all. By the end of the night, Donovan was visibly drunk. His once stoic expression was replaced with a lopsided grin, and he slurred, "You're all good people. I like this." As the group began to disperse, one by one making their excuses, Evelyn found herself alone with her very intoxicated boss. She sighed, debating her options. "All right, Mr. Donovan," she said, helping him to his feet. "Let's get you home." But it wasn't going to be an easy night. The two of them stood outside, in the cold breeze. Evelyn had failed to contact his secretary, and realizing it was too late to figure out his address, she brought Donovan to her apartment. It was a struggle to get him through the door and into her bedroom, where he promptly collapsed onto the bed, dragging her along. She sighed, exhausted, and laid down beside him to catch her breath. But Donovan stirred, his blue eyes hazy and unfocused as they met hers. "Your hair," he murmured, his voice soft and almost dreamy. "It's beautiful." Evelyn's face flushed. "Go to sleep, Mr. Donovan," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. But before she could move, he wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her close. "So warm," he muttered, a boyish smile spreading across his face. Evelyn tried to wiggle free, but his grip tightened. The warmth of his body, the unexpected gentleness of his touch, it was so different from the intimidating CEO she knew. Before she could protest further, exhaustion took over, and the world around her faded to black. Morning came with a harsh reality. Evelyn's eyes snapped open. Donovan was still holding her, shirtless, his arm draped possessively across her waist. "Get off me," she screamed, kicking him hard. Donovan tumbled off the bed, with a yelp. "Earthquake," he mumbled, completely disoriented. "Why did you take your shirt off?" Evelyn clutched the blanket to her body, her face burning with embarrassment. Donovan looked around, bewildered. "What's going on?" The morning light revealed their compromising position, clothes slightly disheveled, bodies too close for professional comfort. The air conditioning hummed, a silent witness to their predicament. Silence hung between them, thick and uncomfortable. Donovan sat on the floor, looking more like a confused puppy than a powerful CEO. His normally perfectly styled hair was a mess, sticking up at odd angles. One side of his suit pants was rucked up, revealing an ankle. Evelyn clutched the blanket tighter, her red hair falling messily around her face. "Do you have any idea what happened last night?" she demanded. Donovan blinked. "I went to dinner with the team." And then, his eyes widened as fragmented memories started flooding back. "Oh, God." "Oh, God is right," Evelyn muttered. He slowly stood up, attempting to regain some dignity. "I don't typically... this isn't..." He stopped, looking monumentally awkward. The absurdity of the situation hit Evelyn like a ton of bricks. She buried her face in her hands, groaning. "I can't believe this is happening." Donovan settled onto a kitchen stool, looking like he'd been dropped into an alien environment. Evelyn moved around her small kitchen with practiced efficiency, pulling out a frying pan and eggs. "You don't really need to do this." He spoke with an awkward smile on his face. "How do you take your coffee?" she asked, glancing over her shoulder, ignoring his statement. "Black," he responded automatically, then added, "Please?" The sizzle of eggs filled the silence. Donovan watched her, seemingly fascinated by the most mundane of morning rituals. His fingers drummed nervously on the kitchen counter. "So," Evelyn said, plate sliding in front of him, "why did you drink so much last night? You clearly can't handle alcohol." A flush crept up Donovan's neck. "It was the first time someone invited me to something. Not a business dinner. Just a get-together." The vulnerability in his voice caught Evelyn off guard. The mighty CEO, reduced to being excited about a simple team dinner. She softened slightly. "Eat your eggs before they get cold." As he ate, she noticed how he held the fork, precise, almost mechanical, like he was following instructions from How to Eat Breakfast manual. Another glimpse behind his perfectly constructed facade. A short while later, a car horn honked outside. Donovan glanced at his watch, then stood abruptly. "My driver," he said, straightening his slightly wrinkled suit. But instead of walking directly to the door, he paused. Something unexpected flickered in his eyes, a mix of vulnerability and something else. He leaned in close, so close Evelyn could smell the lingering scent of last night's wine and coffee. His breath was warm against her ear when he whispered, "We have a secret now, I guess, just between us. I guess that makes us friends." Evelyn's heart raced. Friends? Was this his understanding of friendship? A shared embarrassing moment, a secret tucked away? "That's not exactly how friendships work," she muttered, but he was already turning, walking towards the door. His silhouette, usually so intimidating, now seemed almost playful. The car horn honked again. As the door closed, Evelyn touched her cheek. Her face was burning, her heart doing something entirely unprofessional. Something had changed, and she wasn't sure if it was just her perception of her boss or something more. Over the next few weeks, something subtly shifted in their office dynamic. Evelyn noticed Donovan's glances, no longer purely professional, but carrying a hint of something softer. Sometimes, she caught him almost smiling when she passed by. One afternoon, she found herself inviting him to grab coffee. "Just to discuss the Henderson project," she'd said quickly, as if needing to justify the invitation. But Donovan's eyes lit up in a way that suggested he understood it was more than just a work meeting. At the cafe, she realized how little he knew about ordinary experiences. He stared at the menu like it was written in a foreign language, overwhelmed by choices beyond black coffee. "What do you usually drink?" she asked. "Champagne at board meetings," he responded seriously. Evelyn burst out laughing. "That's not a daily beverage, Mr. Reynolds." She ended up ordering for him a caramel latte. His first sip was comically dramatic, eyes widening at the sweetness. "This is incredible," he said, looking genuinely surprised. It was moments like these that revealed the man behind the CEO persona, curious, somewhat innocent, desperately wanting to understand the world beyond corporate boardrooms. The relationship between them definitely shifted since the incident, leaning more towards friendship and growing beyond slowly. One Friday, after a particularly grueling meeting, Evelyn noticed Donovan looking unusually tense. His brow was furrowed, his jaw tight. "Long week, huh?" she said, catching him in the hallway. "You could say that," he replied, loosening his tie. "I don't suppose there's an instruction manual for how to manage people who argue over fonts?" Evelyn laughed, a sound that seemed to surprise him. "No manuals. But there's a remedy." Donovan raised a skeptical brow. "Oh, come with me." He hesitated, but curiosity won out. She led him down the block to a small arcade, a place she'd often visited when she needed to decompress. Donovan looked completely out of his element among the flashing lights and chaotic noise. "What is this?" he asked, eyeing a photo booth in the corner. "Therapy," Evelyn said with a grin, dragging him inside. The booth's cramped interior forced them closer than Donovan seemed comfortable with. He stiffened as Evelyn fed in coins and hit the button. The flash went off before he could protest, capturing his startled expression. By the third shot, Evelyn was laughing so hard that even Donovan cracked a reluctant smile. When the photos printed, she handed him a strip.
See?
You're human after all. He studied the pictures, his expression softening. I suppose this isn't the worst thing I've ever done. Evelyn laughed again, feeling a strange warmth bloom in her chest. In that moment, she realized just how much she enjoyed these glimpses of the real Donovan. Their outings became more frequent. One weekend, after much convincing, Evelyn dragged Donovan to an amusement park. At first, he resisted, citing an overflowing schedule and a general distaste for crowds. But Evelyn was nothing if not persuasive. I'll let you pick the rides, she said. That assumes I know anything about rides, he replied dryly. It quickly became apparent just how little Donovan knew about such places. He marveled at everything, from the funnel cakes to the roller coasters. When Evelyn suggested they try a shooting game to win a stuffed toy, Donovan's competitive side kicked in. Step aside, he said confidently, rolling up his sleeves. To Evelyn's amazement, he nailed every target with precision. The game attendant, clearly impressed, asked which prize he wanted. That one, Donovan said, pointing to a red-haired doll. Evelyn froze. The attendant handed over the toy, giving her a knowing look. Good choice, buddy, he said with a wink. Donovan frowned, oblivious. What's funny? Evelyn, cheeks burning, snatched the doll. Nothing. Let's go. Over time, Donovan's walls began to crumble. Evelyn learned more about him. How he grew up in a rigid household where failure wasn't an option, how he'd thrown himself into work to avoid dealing with his personal shortcomings, and how he secretly envied the easy camaraderie of his employees. For her part, Evelyn shared pieces of her own life, her love of art, her small-town upbringing, and her dream of traveling the world. She found herself opening up to Donovan in ways she hadn't expected, and his genuine interest to her stories made her feel seen in a way she hadn't before. But not everything was perfect. One evening, during a team brainstorming session, Evelyn noticed Donovan slipping back into his old ways, his tone sharp, his expectations impossible. He dismissed ideas without considering them, his impatience palpable. They had lost a big deal, and pressure seemed to be mounting on them from the shareholders. After the meeting, Evelyn stayed behind. She knocked on his office door and stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Is everything okay? She asked. Donovan looked up from his desk, surprised. Why wouldn't it be? You were different in there. Like the old you. The one who scares people away. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's hard to shake, Evelyn. That's who I've been for so long. But you're not that person anymore, she said gently. At least, not to me. Her words seemed to strike a chord. Donovan leaned back in his chair, his expression softening. You make it sound so easy. It's not, she admitted. But you're trying. That's what matters. Their relationship continued to deepen, the line between professional and personal blurring in ways neither could ignore. One evening, after a long day, Donovan invited Evelyn to his office for a drink. To the end of another successful project, he said, raising his glass. To surviving another week with you as my boss, she teased. They laughed, the sound filling the otherwise quiet office. For a moment, Donovan's gaze lingered on her, his expression unreadable. Evelyn, he began, his voice unusually soft. You make this easier. Make what easier? She asked, her heart pounding. This, he said, gesturing vaguely. Life. People. All of it. Evelyn felt her cheeks warm. She opened her mouth to respond, but the words caught in her throat. Before she could find them, Donovan leaned in, his hand brushing hers. The touch was brief, tentative, but it sent a jolt through her. From that moment on, their relationship blossomed. They learned to balance their professional lives with their growing connection, navigating challenges together with humor and trust. Donovan, once the cold and unapproachable CEO, became a man who laughed, stumbled, and loved openly. And Evelyn, who had always seen the cracks in his facade, became the one to fill them with warmth and light. In each other, they found not just love, but the courage to be their truest selves. And as they walked into the future hand in hand, they knew that together, they could face anything. That's all for today. If you like the story, then subscribe for more such stories.